Welcome, dreamy time travelers, or perhaps insomniac history nerd. Either way, you've clicked on this video because, deep down, you crave historical knowledge delivered with the calming cadence of someone who understands the absurdity of bloomers, baking, and being told you're hysterical because you have a uterus. Today, we're stepping into the sensible leather boots of a woman born in the year 1900. That's right, no phones, no Netflix, no oat milk lattes. It's coal dust, corsets, and conversations about the weather that somehow lasted 3 hours. You'll drift through the decades as we follow her life from birth to her grandmother era, exploring every expectation, societal norm, and weirdly aggressive table etiquette she had to survive along the way. You'll laugh, you'll sigh, might even wake up in the middle and think, wait, did women really boil their laundry? Yes, they did. So tuck in, dim the lights, and join me as we snooze through times. This is a woman's life from 1900 to 1920. Let's start at the beginning. Birth. Our girl was born in 1900, somewhere between the tail end of Victorian melodrama and the beginning of modern chaos. If she's from a working class family, she'll likely come into the world in a drafty bedroom with cracked floorboards, midwives shouting instructions, and a surprising number of lace doilies for a household with no running water. Her name might be Ethel, Pearl, Hattie, or something that sounds like it should be embroidered onto a handkerchief. If she's upper class, she's swaddled in embroidered muslin. If she's lower class, it's probably an old shirt turned into a swaddle. Either way, she's got one job for the next few years: survive. And that's no small task in 1900. Infant mortality rates were like a bad lottery. Diseases like diphtheria, whooping cough, and typhoid lurked in every shared water bucket. Medicine? Oh, it was available, if you count opium-soaked teething. Powders, soothing syrups, laced with morphine. The occasional hot whiskey rub, if she caught a fever. So treatment was bed rest, prayer, and smearing something herbal on her chest. Ideally something that smelled like pine needles and regret. Her. Toys? A carved wooden rattle, if she was lucky. A potato with a face drawn on it, if not. And yet, despite it all, many babies did make it. So our girl, tough as a boiled ham, grows up with the kind of immune system that laughs in the face of today's germs. By the age of 4 or 5, our heroine is officially in the little lady phase of her life, which means be polite, sit up straight, don't interrupt the grown-ups. And whatever you do, never show your ankles unless it's a medical emergency. Our girl's world is one of ruffled pinafores, patent leather shoes that pinch her toes, and endless reminders to mind her tone and don't talk back to Uncle Harold. If she's from a rural family, her mornings are filled with feeding chickens, fetching water, and trying not to step in anything alive. If she's from an urban middle-class household, she might attend Sunday school, help fold linens, and get really, really good at being quiet in adult conversations. Playtime? Sure, if it's educational. She might have a porcelain doll whose expression is so blank it looks like it saw something horrible in the Crimean War, or a hoop and stick. Yes, an actual hoop that you push with a stick. Kids were really out here inventing joy. And then there's the subtle, constant pressure to grow up into the right kind of woman. The gentle remarks from aunties about being ladylike, the strict lessons in modesty, and the early, unspoken understanding that the world didn't belong to her. Just let her borrow a corner of it. School, if she attended one, was a mix of hope, routine, and chalk dust. Our girl walks to school wearing starched clothes and a face full of determination. Her desk is wooden, squeaky, and shared. Her books are hand-me-downs from her older brothers, with doodles of mustaches scribbled on all the historical figures, the subjects, reading, writing, arithmetic, and of course, moral instruction. Because nothing says life skills like memorizing passages from a McGuffey reader and being reminded that vanity leads to ruin. Discipline was strict. Teachers wielded rulers like wands of justice, and whispering during spelling practice could land you in the corner with a literal dunce cap on your head. But despite the limitations, she learns. She reads poetry. She copies. Cursive until her wrist cramps. She plays the triangle in music class and dreams of something bigger, even if she doesn't have the words for it yet, unless her family needed her at home. Because if her mother became sick, if the laundry piled up, if younger siblings screamed non-stop, school became a luxury that life simply couldn't afford. And so, many girls left school early, not because they weren't smart, but because being smart didn't boil the potatoes or change the baby. Ah, yes, teenagehood. That magical time in a young girl's life when the world says, "Congratulations. You're now biologically inconvenient." Our girl has crossed the invisible line. She's no longer just a child. She is now a young woman. This means her skirts are longer. Her outings are monitored. And she begins receiving advice from every direction on how to behave properly in society. All while she's still trying to figure out what's happening to her armpits. And let's talk about the body changes. When her period arrives, no one calls it that. Instead, it's your monthly visitor, Aunt Flo, or the deeply Victorian, the curse. She's handed a cloth napkin, a belt with clips, and the unspoken command: deal with it quietly. Sex ed? Don't be ridiculous. All she's told is, don't let a boy touch your knee. And that's somehow supposed to cover everything from basic anatomy to lifelong decision-making. Emotionally, it's a confusing storm of embroidered expectations and hormonal chaos. She's taught to bottle everything up, lest it's in a diary that no one's supposed to read, but absolutely will. If she's in a stricter household, even her laughs are watched. Don't be too loud. They say, don't slouch. Don't walk like that. Don't eat too quickly. You'll look unladylike. It's a full-time job being presentable, and she's not even being paid. Meanwhile, her brothers are outside breaking windows with slingshots and getting called spirited. Life is, in a word, unfair, but very well behaved. Now that she's reached the highly celebrated age of old enough to marry, but too young to have opinions, the pressure of courtship begins. And oh boy, was it complicated. You couldn't just go on a date. No. You had a caller, right? Young gentlemen called at your home, which sounds sweet. until you realize this meant sitting stiffly in the parlor, while your father glared from behind a newspaper and your mother offered cookies no one wanted. And what exactly was courtship? It was a performance, a chaste, awkward dance of reputation, family, alliances, and not letting anyone catch you having fun. You might be walked home from church, which meant talking about the weather for 12 blocks while maintaining 6 inches of moral space between your elbows. Flirting was subtle. A glance, a dropped glove, an ever so slightly too long comment about a piano recital. If you were lucky, you actually liked the boy. If not, you were expected to marry him anyway, especially if he was respectable, gainfully employed, and didn't chew with his mouth open. For upper-class girls, there were elaborate debutante balls and endless conversations about family lineage. For working-class girls, it was usually church socials or community dances, assuming they had time after work and chores. And remember one misstep, one kiss. Outside marriage, one rumor, and your whole reputation could dissolve faster than a sugar cube in tea. Courtship wasn't romantic. It was a test. Could you be sweet, pure, demure, and still attractive enough to land a husband before society started, calling you a spinster at the ripe old age of 23? Congratulations. Our girl is officially a bride. The bells are ringing. The cake is dry. And the ceremony, though brief, is legally binding. She's gone from the young lady of the house to the keeper of another man's socks. The wedding dress isn't white because of purity symbolism, though. That helps sell it. It's white because Queen Victoria did it once, and everyone's been stressed about it ever since. If she's middle or upper class, she might get a hope chest, a wooden box full of linens, doilies, monogrammed dish towels. If she's working class, she gets a frying pan, a broom, and some strong encouragement to produce children before her in-laws start asking questions. And now that she's married, well, say goodbye to whatever independence she had. Legally, her husband now owns. It's quite a lot. Her wages, if she had any, her body don't get us started, and even her children. Yep, he gets automatic custody in most places. She becomes Mrs. Husband's name. Not Mary, not Clara, not Beatrice. Just the wife. And society loves a wife. Not because they respect her, but because now she's easier to categorize. A helper, a mother, a homemaker, a moral compass, a silent partner in a life she may, or may not have picked with her whole heart. Romantic, not really, but survivable. Let's not beat around the bush. Childbirth in the early 1900s was a battlefield. Pain relief? No. You were expected to give birth with nothing but sheer grit, a clean rag, and maybe a stick to bite down on. Doctors said that natural pain built character. You know what else built character? Not dying. Our woman probably gives birth at home. She lies on a straw mattress while her mother, aunt, or local midwife shouts things like, "Breathe," and try not to scream. The neighbors will hear. The baby arrives, usually after hours of labor, and is promptly cleaned with lukewarm water wrapped in a cloth and placed in a wooden cradle that's older than her marriage. Now repeat this process 6 to 10 times That's right. Birth control was unreliable, socially taboo, or simply unavailable. You could try timing your cycle using the moon. Guesswork and cross fingers, but mostly you just hoped you didn't get pregnant again during laundry day. And don't forget the infant care. There are no baby monitors, no disposable diapers, no safe plastic toys, just cloth nappies, wooden teething rings, and the constant fear that your baby would catch something from the neighbors. Cough. Breastfeeding was common, unless she had to return to work quickly, in which case, animal milk, porridge, or whatever substitute they could find would do. Formula existed, sure, but it was often laced with, let's say, adventurous ingredients. And remember, she does all this while cooking, cleaning, sewing, hosting, and pretending everything is fine. She loves her children, of course, but wow, that woman is tired. Like bone deep, permanent. I don't remember the last time I sat down. For fun, kind of tired. So what does a regular day look like for our woman? Imagine an Olympic obstacle course, but replace hurdles with laundry piles, and the gold medal is getting through the day without crying into your stew. Let's start with the morning routine. She wakes up before everyone else, of course. Not because she's excited to seize the day, but because someone has to light the damn stove before anyone can eat. The fire's out. The water's cold. The baby's crying. The dog needs to be shooed off the bread dough. And that's before 7 a.m. breakfast isn't just toast and coffee. It's a full production. Eggs, if you've got chickens, porridge, biscuits, butterwich. She may have churned herself, unless she's upgraded to the modern miracle of store-bought lard. Ooh, progress. Then comes cleaning, which in this era is a team sport. You play alone. There are no vacuum cleaners, no washing machines, no Roombas named Gary. Carpets, beat them with a stick. Clothes, boil them in a giant pot and stir like you're making the witch's soup. Floors, sweep, mop, scrub, and then sweep again because the kids walked through with their outside shoes. And let's talk about toilets. If she lives rural, it's an outhouse. Rain or shine, day or night. If urban, maybe she has indoor plumbing. But don't expect anything fancy. You flushed by gravity, not buttons. Afternoon means more cooking, sewing buttons, mending socks, writing letters with a fountain pen and perfect penmanship, even though her toddler just broke a vase. Then dinner, dishes, bedtime, routines, and just Mabe. She sits down with a book for 15 minutes before the baby wakes up again. Now, let's talk about a woman's second full-time job, maintaining her reputation. You see, back in the early 1900s, your image mattered more than your actual reality. A woman could be exhausted, overworked, and on the verge of a public breakdown, but as long as her apron was clean and her smile was polite, she was a credit to her husband. The expectations were everywhere. You must be modest, but not dowdy. You must speak with clarity, but not too loudly. You must be sociable, but never flirt. You must walk like a lady, sit like a lady, and somehow bake 3 pies a week while never looking sweaty. There was an unspoken law that everything you did reflected on your family, especially in small towns where gossip moved faster than the postal service and had a longer memory than Aunt Margaret. People noticed if your curtains weren't clean. They noticed if your husband came home drunk. They noticed if you were a bit too friendly to the man who delivered eggs. So, our girl keeps everything in order, not just for pride, but for survival. Because a ruined reputation could mean fewer job prospects, strained social ties, or whispered judgment at church. Religion often reinforced this. Sunday mornings were for worship, but also for low-key judgment. You'd better be dressed in your best hat, with your children brushed and behaved, because someone in the next pew was definitely comparing your hymnal enthusiasm to theirs. Even hobbies had rules. Embroidery, acceptable, piano, lovely, but reading novels about independent women and personal freedom, dangerous, and heaven help her if she was too educated. People would say things like, "She reads too much, it's making her disagreeable." So she balanced every single day between who she was supposed to be, and who people thought she might become if she ever got a taste of freedom. It's the 1910s now, and the world is getting loud. Industry is booming. Cars are honking. Skirts are rising a little. And most importantly, men are going to war, which means women are being called into roles that were previously inappropriate or too strenuous for their delicate constitutions. Suddenly, that woman who is only trusted with a ladle is now wielding welding tools. She's working in munitions factories, printing newspapers, driving ambulances, and managing entire farms. All this after decades of being told she'd faint if she'd read too many books. World War I didn't just shake Europe. It shook the idea that women belonged exclusively in the home. And guess what? Women handled it. They got the job done. And then went home and still cooked dinner. Even if our girl doesn't work outside the home, she feels the tremor, rationing, letter writing, making do with less, hoping her son doesn't end up in a trench somewhere in Belgium, or that her husband comes back at all. Meanwhile, something else is stirring. Suffrage. The women's movement had been around for decades, but now it's marching in the streets. It's setting mailboxes on fire in Britain. It's chaining itself to gates. It's giving speeches that make the clergy uncomfortable. And finally, some governments begin to cave. New Zealand and Australia had already granted women voting rights earlier, but by 1920, the US passed the 19th Amendment. Other countries follow, one slow domino at a time. Our girl, now in her 40s or 50s, isn't just surviving anymore. She's watching the world change. Maybe she voted. Maybe she marched. Maybe she just whispered about time as she folded laundry. But she knows one thing for sure. The next generation won't grow up thinking womanhood means silence. Now, the decades catch up. Our woman, once the curious girl with muddy boots and thick braids, is now a grandmother. Her hands are gnarled from laundry, knitting, and life. Oh, her back aches when it rains, but her eyes still twinkle when someone brings her tea without asking. Old age in the early 20th century isn't glamorous. There are no pensions for most women, no retirement parties, and no spa weekends. She might live with her children, or in a quiet cottage filled with ticking clocks and heavy curtains. She wears thick stockings, keeps a candy tin full of buttons, and she has firm opinions about how to boil a potato correctly. But she's seen things. She's seen corsets come and go, horses replaced by motor cars, letters by telephones. She's seen sons go to war, daughters demand more, and a world that once told her to stay quiet, finally asking her what she thinks. She might not have written books or held office, but she held families together. She passed on stories, recipes, warnings, wisdom. Her legacy isn't just in photographs or journals. It's in the stubborn strength of every girl who followed. Girls who didn't have to ask permission to speak or learn or vote. And maybe, just maybe, she smiles when her great-granddaughter says, "I don't want to get married," and no one argues. Because this woman didn't just live through history, she bent it. You're still here? Then pull up a pillow, my soft-spoken time traveler. Because now that we've walked through her life, let's sit in it. Let's talk about the quiet things women did in the 1900s that never made the textbooks. The invisible. Little acts that propped up empires and kept families from dissolving into puddles of laundry water and passive aggression. Like how many teaspoons of sugar she added to tea, depending on how bad someone's day was, or how she could memorize 7. People's emotional states without once being asked how she was doing, or the skill of boiling undergarments, starching collars, and folding everything so neatly you'd think dignity could be pressed into a fabric crease. She didn't just live through a changing world. She managed it, and usually while wearing shoes 2 sizes too small because someone said it made her walk nicely. Let us not forget, she was fluent in nonverbal communication. A single sigh? That's a paragraph. A glance over the spectacles. A whole thesis. One well-placed Right? That's emotional devastation. She was the human version of duct tape. Had a loose hinge? She'd fix it with a butter knife, out of flour. She'd stretch bread with mashed potato and confidence. Your stomach hurt? She had 12 cures. Most of them involved tea. All of them involved her rubbing your back and saying, "You'll be fine, dear. If you're not dead by morning, you're going to school." Then there's Unwritten Laws of Womanhood, 1900 edition. First, you must know everyone's birthday, their favorite jam, and unresolved childhood trauma. Second, you must never sit down unless all others are seated, even the cat. Third, if you cry in public, apologize for being dramatic, then offer someone else a handkerchief. Fourth, you may not know your own opinion, but you are expected to mediate between your husband and the milkman with tact. Lastly, you must keep a family secret, a beef stew recipe, and your mouth shut at dinner. If the woman of 1900 had more time, if her hands weren't always wet, her days not always full, her mind not always keeping 3 timelines running at once, what might she have done? Would she have painted? Would she have written books, composed? Music, started revolutions, was something more than just sewing circles. Maybe, maybe not. But what she did do was shape the world one spoonful, stitch and sidelong glance at a time. and that deserves a second hour, or 10. Before we close the curtain on the life of our early 1900s woman, before we fluff her pillow and tuck her gently into the footnotes of history, let's make space for the other women, the ones who made noise, who made rules, who made mistakes, and who made history twitch. Women who weren't content to just sweep the floors. They wanted to rip them up too. And all of them iconic. There was a woman named Emmeline Pankhurst, the boss fight of suffragettes. She wore corsets, but punched with politics. When people said women weren't ready to vote, she said, "Fine, I'll set things on fire until you change your mind." She is the leader of the Women's Social and Political Union. Emmeline pushed British women's suffrage into the mainstream with marches, hunger strikes, and yes, property damage. And in between hunger strikes, she somehow managed to look impeccable in a sash. She wrote my own story in third person because being modest was simply not on brand. Some called her a menace. Others called her mother. But either way, the Parliament started sweating, and Victorian dads fainted daily. And then there was Ida Wells, the journalist with a spine of steel. She is sharp as a blade and just as precise. She didn't need fire. She had the pen. She wrote about the things no one wanted to see: lynching, injustice, hypocrisy in churches that claimed brotherhood on Sundays and practiced silence the rest of the week. She is the co-founder of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. She refused to give up. Her seat on a segregated train 70 years before Rosa Parks. Some early white suffragists tried to exclude her from marches. She showed up anyway, unbothered, moisturized or lame. So she walked right in anyway, front row, no hesitation, wearing dignity like armor. Across the sea, a quiet woman stood in a glowing lab. Her name is Marie Curie, sleeves rolled up and skin aglow. Literally, she is the mother of radioactivity, which sounds way cooler than it is. She wasn't trying to be a feminist icon. She was trying to isolate radium, and in the process, she discovered two elements, won 2 Nobel Prizes, and carried radioactive samples in her pocket like mints. She made the periodic table panic. She also made death rays. But, accidentally, scientists doubted her for being a woman. She made them cry into their beakers. Then came Alice Roosevelt. Not a scientist, not a revolutionary in the traditional sense. No, Alice was pure chaos in a pearl necklace. She is the America's first political girl boss troll. She was the president's daughter, but behaved like the family embarrassment your aunt won't stop talking about. She smoked cigars, carried a pet snake named Emily to social events, and once buried a voodoo doll of her father in the White House garden. And we adore her, because sometimes rebellion doesn't look like a riot. It looks like a smirk. Over in China, Qujin was writing poetry that bit like thunder and plotting revolutions between stanzas. She wore men's clothing, trained with swords, called foot binding, a prison sentence disguised as beauty. They executed her for plotting to overthrow the Qing dynasty, became a martyr, definitely a main character. So history wrote her name in ink, too bold to fade. Martyr, writer, fighter, legend. Bertha von Suttner didn't wield a sword. She wielded a very strongly worded essay. She is called the one who scared Alfred Nobel into inventing the Peace Prize. She told the world that peace wasn't a passive thing. It was a choice, a fight, protest of its own. She called militarism a disease. Everyone clutching their bayonets hated her. Honestly, she's a girl boss. Then came Maria Montessori, who looked at a room full of squirming children and said, "They're not broken. They're just not bored yet." She let kids touch everything, learn at their own pace. Educators hated her. Children adored her. And now there's a Montessori school on every other block. Touché. In early Hollywood, Anna May Wong walked into a studio full of white men and became the first Chinese-American film star. She's also the first to be repeatedly robbed of roles. They gave her roles like Dragon Lady or Exotic Maid number 3. But she brought elegance and power to every scene. Even when the script was trash, she wasn't allowed to kiss white actors on screen. So instead, she made headlines off it. Fashion icon, polyglot, sarcasm queen. Then there was Margaret Sanger, birth control's most problematic mother. She is a nurse with fire in her bones and controversy in her wake. She opened the first birth control clinic in the US and got arrested for it too. She said no uterus, no opinion. Decades before it trended, she believed women deserved to control their own bodies, but her legacy is tangled. She also supported eugenics, which is not just problematic, but genuinely harmful. She changed the world and left scars. On it, sometimes history is a cracked mirror. Truth, reflection, damage, and all. And finally, Mary MacArthur, who didn't care if her shoes were polished as long as the factory women were paid. She organized strikes. With the same energy as a PTA mom with a megaphone, she believed that women's work was real work, and that you didn't need a college degree to demand dignity. She didn't die famous, but thanks to her, 1,000 lunch breaks exist. These were just 10. There were thousands. Some were on stages, some in kitchens, some wrote books, some raised them, some set fire to norms, others watered gardens. No one saw bloom, but all of them. They refused to sit still. These women weren't flawless, but they weren't supposed to be. They were loud, awkward, brilliant, angry, funny. They were called difficult, nasty, delusional, and most of them smiled anyway. Some wore lab coats. Others wore high collars, or protest signs, or scandal. And somehow, all of them cracked open the door just enough, so the next woman wouldn't have to knock as hard. So to the women who dared to be too much, too loud, too strange, or too political, we're still riding your chaos. And honestly, it's lovely here. Thanks for snoozing through times with us. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of early 20th century women, subscribe, like, and let us know which era you'd like to explore next. And remember, behind every quiet grandmother was once a girl who dodged gossip, churned butter, and fought for her right to vote. Sleep well, dream of voting rights and starchless aprons. And we'll see you in the next episode of Snooze Through Times.